This final session is, I've likened it to gardener's question time, but so maybe a digital question time. So that try and keep us on theme. You know, we don't want to go, I don't want to go down the road of asking questions about anything, what do you have for breakfast, what's your views on Brexit or Burko or any of those kinds of topical issues, but let's keep it on the digital twin side of things. My name is Paul Wilkinson. I write a blog about collaboration and technology, mobile solutions and things like that. I tweeted very heavily this morning as well, so some of you might have seen some of those tweets. It's my pleasure to introduce my fellow panelists, and I'm going to ask them briefly to introduce themselves and give a perspective on maybe one key thing that they've liked from the day so far. And then we'll get into some questions. I have a pad next to me with some questions on it. But we can still use Slido. And if Slido runs out, I'll take questions from the floor as well. Okay? So, firstly, far end, Anne Kemp, briefly introduce yourself, please.
Well, you are going to regret the gardener's question, because, of course, what I'll say is my pride and joy is my potting shed at the end of the garden. But moving rapidly on from that, I'm Anne Kemp. I work for Atkins. I'm chair of the UK BIM Alliance, which also hosts the Building Smart UK and Ireland chapter. I'm the convener for what you will immediately recognise, ISO 19650. That has lifted what we've been working hard on in the UK around BIM to an international standard. It is about whole life. It is anticipating what we need from the National Digital Twin. So I'm really excited about that. So the UK BIM framework being the foundation for the National Data Twin. And I think what I'm excited about is that we can really start to look at what the societal benefits will be. This is not just about the construction industry anymore.
Okay, and Bhupinder.
Good afternoon. My name is Bhupinder Singh. I'm the Chief Product Officer for a company called Bentley Systems, which just celebrated its 35th year anniversary and been through our third disruption from starting off as a CAD company to a BIM company, and now advancing BIM to digital twins. And what we're particularly excited about being able to offer sort of an open platform for cloud, mobile, web, digital twin enabled solutions, and the benefits that have been particularly exciting to participate today and hear about all the possibilities with the National Digital Twin, with connected digital twins, with safety, with resilience, and the new kinds of business models that can be enabled. And then also hearing all the inhibitors. I was particularly struck with earlier today, people talking about the data silos and 95% of the data being inaccurate and 75% of the data being missing. And I think how we can, as a company, help with that is something that is really exciting for me.
Thank you, Bhupinder. One of the points that was raised this morning by Jamie Radford was some interesting statistics from the assessment work that he'd undertaken. And one of the figures that I picked out was that 62% of owners still think designs are produced largely in 2D. In the context of BIM, you know, are we pushing ahead too quickly with digital twin thinking before some people have even adopted BIM? Anne, in your role as chair of UK BIM Alliance, do you want to take that?
So I think it's useful for us to embrace that this is both are joined and are jointly important on the journey. So the language might be changing, but what we're doing is still very much based on what has come before. So the emphasis we've really come in moving BIM Level 2 to an international standard is that we really are talking about managing information. Certainly from a built environment perspective, most certainly from a whole life perspective. So it really is setting the foundations, the basis for where we want to go with the National Digital Twin. So I think as we inhabit this new language, if you like, of where CDBB is really working. I don't see a conflict, providing we take what has gone before, we honour all of the people who've worked so hard on those standards around BIM, and we take it through into those next steps. So the UK BIM framework is here to stay, it's landed, it's an important part of what we're going to be developing around the information management framework, which will support the national digital twin. So if we're thinking about managing information, the tools that we use and what are enabled through that are a consequence, but they're not the be-all and end-all. It's not just about 3D modelling. You use 3D models if they are actually going to help and deliver on the purpose and the questions that you really want to be addressing in making your critical decisions. So I think the emphasis needs to change, perhaps. Our priorities, our motivations, I actually think are really strong now. I think uptake on what we used to talk about as BIM Level 2 was much clearer when we're talking about the integration across the UK estate, being able to get deeper insights across the sector, across cities, across the countryside, which will benefit society, it will benefit environment.
Bhupinder, as a solutions vendor, Anne has talked about the tools there. From your perspective, what is the connection from BIM through to digital twins?
Well, as Anne pointed out, the I in BIM is information. So it is definitely an evolution. And if you look at the Gemini principles, and I was making note of all the different boxes in there, which I think reinforces what Anne was saying, that all the work that's been done in your BIM level standards is only being extended when you talk to digital twins. You're not just discarding that whole advancement, if you will. So for us, we look at it as advancing BIM, advancing to get to information from data. You have to go through some fundamental constructs. And I think the center of your 9-box in the Gemini principles, which had federation, openness, insights, evolution, conveying, I think evolution is one of the boxes in the Gemini principles, which talks about everything being incremental, as opposed to, well, forget about all the stuff you did and let's start with something different. And the openness, because the aspect of BIM that in some cases people struggled with was ending up with what some people have called dark data. So if you embarked on a BIM journey and you started creating more information, trying to extract value from that became harder because they were tremendously intelligent applications that were then locking up the data in these formats that were inscrutable. And integrating this information with other sources of data were other challenges that you were grappling with. So maybe, I don't know if those were reasons for impedance as to why certain things didn't happen fast enough, but clearly breaking through those barriers is a fundamental requirement that we see as a software provider. And that openness is sort of the heart of unlocking the value. And so you've got to be open to the applications, you've got to be open to where the data is, because the data is everywhere in systems such as ProjectWise and systems such as BIM 360 and file, SharePoint in databases, being able to federate information from there. And finally, the other point that was made earlier today, which is also very important, is the taxonomy and the schemas, whether that's the ISO standards we're talking about, the IFC standards we're talking about, being practical and being able to support and emit any given standard for any given purpose. And those would be the hallmarks of what we think as a software provider we ought to offer up as enabler on this digital twin journey for the industry.
Okay. Opening up the data seems to be a challenge. if you were to make recommendations to the digital transformation, digital framework task group, what influence could they bring to bear on the different industries to support the open sharing of data? Anne?
Well, I sit on the digital framework task group, so that's yeah, okay. What I was about to say is, if we think of BIM as being better information management, that helps us. And the joy I have in seeing actually the progress with Digital Built Britain and the National Digital Twin is that actually we're seeing that actually it doesn't matter where the data comes from. Actually, how we use that data and integrate it is the exciting bit. So actually, given that I'm a geographer and actually geospatial is close to my heart, the fact that that has become a part of the landscape is hugely exciting. But that's talking about it from a technology perspective, but it also is from a sector perspective as well. And I've talked at ICE for quite a while now, as the invisible superhero digital dynamo as well. And it is all about, let's try to urge people to really be moving to a common language, being less tribal in their approach, which engenders silo behaviours, development of standards which only apply to them. We can really start to say, what is the overall purpose? Why are we doing this as an industry, as professionals? I think it starts to help us to share motivation, energy, enthusiasm to actually get us to a point where we move on from the problems that we take for granted and we accept at the moment. And for what I'd like to do is that we challenge those, that we don't have to do it that way. And I think it is all around what is the overall purpose? Why are we here? We want to make a difference. We want to make a better world. We want to be able to respond to disasters, to people who are suffering, whether it be a disaster, whether it be a drought, whether it be from an environmental crisis, whether it be, unfortunately, from warfare, etc. And I know that's huge. I'm really pulling back. But when it comes down to it, some of the things that we debate about and we talk about and we're not prepared to compromise, it actually seems pretty petty, doesn't it? So I think if we could challenge ourselves individually, we do need a cultural change if we are going to move forward. And the change can come from us as individuals. We can influence our organisations and our institutions, but we shouldn't be relying on that organisation and institution all of the time. We need to speak individually. When we're having debates in a workshop, it can often be the person with the loudest voice. Actually, if you work as a team in a meeting, you can listen to each other, you can challenge that person and that loud voice, and hopefully you reach more and more of a consensus. And that is the experience that I'm getting as convener at an international level. It's actually been a really humbling experience. But until we are actually all able to shift and behave in different ways, we will have a problem. So I know I've digressed a wee bit, Paul, but I do think that actually we need to be thinking of this from an individual perspective, and we need to individually be braver. Yes, people are going to challenge and disagree with us, but actually getting to yes means that you have to listen, and then you have to be able to talk in a way that other people will understand. And I think that is sort of having gone from the big issues to the microcosm of an individual. That is what we need to be doing to be able to really integrate and tackle the challenges ahead of us.
Right. I know from talking with the gentleman from Anglian Water who spoke earlier on today, that Anglian Water have had a big focus on behaviours in some of their work with the infrastructure clients group, their guidance on frameworks and so on. But I pose the question really to Bhupinder, you know, is it the software that enshrines the behaviours, or is it the behaviours that's reflected in the software?
Which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Well, I think from a standpoint, you have business processes and effective solutions. Today, what is possible with the promise of a connected digital twin, I think, are connected digital workflows. Right? We're all getting accustomed these days in our personal lives to get notifications, you know, when the traffic's building up, right? You have an appointment on your phone. It says, well, traffic's building up. If you need to leave to make that appointment, it's alerting you on something in your personal life, whether your flight's delayed. Wouldn't it be great if our infrastructure is alerting us the same way about, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm feeling pretty sick right now. You need to come and fix my beam column connection because I'm feeling a lot of stress, right? No pun intended. But so I think that behavior, to back to your question, I think that's kind of stuff that would be possible with digital workflows, with connected digital twins, because somebody mentioned earlier, what's different from BIM to digital twins is this two-way connection. So it's talking to us as much as we're talking to it and providing insights. So what's in the software, what's, the behavior, there's still going to be intelligent human beings that have to interpret and make decisions, but you're going to have dashboards with insights and real-time information that. The other point I'd like to point out, which is also interesting when you talk about the BIM and digital twin, going back to your earlier question, it would irk us to no end for people to think that there was the BIM model, that it would be one BIM model and it's just going to fall over on its side. So who owns it? Who owns the data? Whereas mercifully, we've all now are talking about multiple digital twins, right? There will be lots of digital twins that are all connected from project inception around project digital twins to performance digital twins that you'll be using in your asset management system. So I think that's a great evolution of thought for all of us in the industry as opposed to where we were thinking about it. So I do think bringing that thinking only helps the BIM thinking. It's not or BIM or digital twins. It's bringing more refined thought to the whole problem that we have.
Okay. It'd be useful, I think, for the audience just to have a view of some of the Slido questions that are coming up, if that's possible. One of the ones that I've got in front of me sort of addresses the point that Bhupinder's just made about connecting some of the workflows in the process. So what are your thoughts on the challenges of capturing and assessing current assets rather than just focusing purely on the design and construction of new assets? Bhupinder?
Okay, I'll quickly, and then Anne, feel free to jump in. It's absolutely the case, as I think Mark was mentioning, right? It would take us 200 years if we were just going to focus on the delta of new versus going back and capturing the existing. And being able to effectively capture the as-existed universe in a digital way, there's been some, as a self-confessed technical geek, there's some really magical new sorts of technology today that are from consumer things like your smartphone to drones to point clouds to images. There's such new technology available to go out and capture existing conditions and sensor existing infrastructure that you can then use as a digital canvas and do lots of insights from. So I absolutely believe that we can go after the built environment at the same time that you want to go after your new CapEx projects and build these performance digital twins on infrastructure that's been around. In fact, I think there's a little crucible for the West Cambridge campus where they're actually taking a project for CDBB where they're building a digital twin of an existing I think the West Campus of the University of Cambridge, to build out a little pilot where people can exercise different sorts of technology and aggregate all this information together. So there's a lot of magic happening in that area where we have some software called context capture that people can use, but it absolutely needs to be able to address the current as-built conditions as well as the greenfield projects.
Great. Anne?
Yeah, so it's been one of the unfortunate misunderstandings, I think, with the BIM programme, was that it was about just the design and the construct. And I guess, yeah, it is interesting reflecting, as I say, on your own perspective and where you're coming from. As a geographer, I have always assumed it was whole life and it was about the existing built environment and then where a new project fits in. But that's where I think we get caught, because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what the other person doesn't know, or actually what their true understanding is. And I think quite often we start talking assuming that somebody understands totally what's in our own head. I think it's so important that any new project has to be considered within the existing environment, both natural and built. Again, I slightly get uncomfortable that perhaps we neglect the natural, and that when we talk about smart cities, what on earth's happening to the hinterlands and the rural areas? So, you know, I think our ambitions, we do need to start somewhere. We absolutely need to start somewhere. The part 3 of the BIM standards is going forward internationally. I am really excited about it because it is embracing all that we've been talking about today around whole life and the national digital twin, and that it's talking about the existing built environment and how you can set a new project within that, but also how you update as you're operating and maintaining. Hugely important, for instance, for Grenville, hugely important for the recent failure of the reservoir up in Derbyshire, which fortunately didn't end in the disaster that it could have done. There are so many different applications which do require cross-section collaboration and integration. So it's almost we shouldn't be arguing about it. What we need to be talking about is practically, what are the first steps to get there? Let's not be overwhelmed. We do need to start somewhere. And I think the underground assets is a perfect example of that. You can't have a smart city if you don't have a clue what's underground. But that has been talked about and debated for so many years in this institution at Ordnance Survey. We have to start somewhere. So let's not get overwhelmed. Let's get started. Let's roll up our sleeves.
Okay. Where would you like to see the National Digital Twin project being in about 5 years' time?
Oh, well, having done the job. That's all right, isn't it, Mark? Yeah, 5 years rather than 30. I think it would be fantastic if we'd got the overall plan for the information management framework, which will provide the basis for the National Digital Twin, established such that we've got the standards process started at international and European and UK level. But rather than waiting for those standards to come up, I don't see any reason why we can't be pushing out the guidance and the tools to help prepare everyone for that. So that's where I would like to see that we've actually got a receptive industry who are already familiar with what will be within the standards, are already experimenting, and actually that we're starting to be able to push data out to the public and to citizens as well as the industry itself. I think with a bit of energy and wind behind the sails, we could do that.
Bhupinder, in 5 years' time, where would you like to see the industry positioning itself as far as digital twins are concerned?
Well, it would be great if, like smartphones, you wonder how you live without them, right? I do think that if we had enough use cases of examples in our daily lives where you had instrumented digital twins that you went and you were able to simulate a scenario where, you know, all of us in the next 5 years are going to be faced with disasters, natural disasters, extreme climate events. And to my mind, if in 5 years we are all benefiting as citizens from more safe and resilient infrastructure, I think that would be a world I would like my kids to live in, right? That you know that your city, you demand that of your city, that you could say, listen, a 100-year flood is going to happen far more frequently than 100 years. What are you doing to make sure the city is resilient under those kinds of situations? I think the more we would, as citizens, demand that of our governments, I think that would be a driver to us of being able to live in, you know, safer, more resilient, and more sustainable cities, I think. So 5 years from now, it would be great to be living in that sort of a world, in my opinion.
And